Welcome everyone to our session on online career services, why to offer them and how to offer them. My name is Jen Davies and I'm the Manager of Career Development Services at the Academic Advising and Career Center at the University of Toronto Scarborough.
And I'm Adrian Berg. I'm Employer Engagement Coordinator at the University of Toronto Scarborough, working with Jen.
Awesome. And the Academic Advising and Career Center is an interesting place. As a center, we offer a combination of academic advising and study skills coaching to our primarily 14,000 undergraduate students, as well as the typical suite of career development services from career counseling on questions like what do I want to be when I grow up, all the way through the kinds of employer connections and recruiting activities coordinated by folks like Adrian. So today we're going to be talking about a number of the activities that we have offered since the pandemic started in March 2020. By the end, we hope you will have developed an appreciation for using learning outcomes for decision making when it comes to your choices of technology and also the kinds of programming you offer. We hope that you'll have an understanding of the interplay between technology and the kinds of learning activities that you choose to offer. And you'll be able to apply the lessons we learned to your own services. In the Cannexus conference platform, you will be able to find a PDF version of this PowerPoint, so do feel free to pause now and download that if you would like to. There are many hyperlinks to our documents and resources embedded throughout that PDF, so we like to hope that it's something that you might want to save and keep for future reference. So in this session, we will cover three kinds of services that we've offered during the pandemic. We'll spend the bulk of our time talking about our online conference. It was our first big COVID impacted event way back in April 2020, which we turned around in the 6 weeks from the time the university closed to the time it was offered. And we learned a lot there that we were able to apply throughout the rest of the year to our online job finding club and to a range of gigantic and tiny online networking events, all of which were well received by the attendees and participants. And all of this was offered on a very now well-known platform called Zoom, with one exception, which we'll talk about. So let's start with our online career conference. Since 2014, our conference called Get Hired has followed a 3-day plan of sort of scaffolded themes and learning goals, which help us to really target the conference's content and help us make decisions about what sessions we offer and what we want guest speakers to talk about. We begin planning for Get Hired every November. In fact, at the time of recording, we secured all of our speakers several weeks ago, all of our key speakers, I guess I should say. The Get Hired themes are typically first day, getting to know yourself, of course, understanding the knowledge, skills, and attributes that you possess that you bring to the world of work. The second day focuses on the tools you need for getting hired, like, for example, the ability to talk about those things in an interview. And on the third day, we focus on not job searching alone. We talk about different strategies for networking and engaging with employers and engaging with your community for finding opportunities and finding support systems as well, because job searching can be really challenging. The learning goals help us to guide, our choices of activities, because in knowing what it is that we want students to take away from every session, we know what kinds of activities we need to plan. One of the things that we have striven to accomplish with the Get Hired conference is actually really to measure our learning outcomes. We find that the measurements that we take are actually very valuable for making decisions in the next year. So we really value our student feedback. We also value students' self-declared assessments of how much they've learned on particular topics. So for example, we ask the question, how well can you express the knowledge and skills that you've gained through your education as they apply to the world of work? And students are asked to answer this question as they register. So before they have attended the conference, we ask students to answer this question. So students are asked this question as they are registering for the conference. We also ask students after the conference to answer the exact same questions. Now, of course, getting data after the fact is significantly more challenging than getting data required to register for the event. But we do get numbers back, and over the last number of years, we've actually been able to aggregate these data And we actually do know that there are statistically significant increases in learning on a number of these elements, which is very nerdy and very cool for us. At the end of each day, we also ask students to rate their learning in sort of a pre-post strategy on the specific sessions that they attended throughout that day. So it's done at the same time. That's why it's called pre-post, not pre and then post. Most years, the greatest learning shows about a 2-point change on our 4-point scale, which is very significant in terms of the self-reported amount of learning that students have accomplished. Pretty exciting. A lot of years, it's actually a self-assessment activity that is our number one most impactful thing, which I think speaks to how busy students are. I don't think they have a lot of time to really reflect on what they're getting out of experiences all the time. So they really appreciate the opportunity to get hired to do that. Now, recently at the University of Toronto Scarborough, the Academic Advising and Career Centre has been aligned under our Assistant Dean with the Accessibility Services Office. And that's been a really fruitful opportunity for us to increase the inclusionary practices and our ability to really think through what's needed to accommodate students effectively and thoughtfully well in advance of an event. So being proactive rather than being reactive. And Adrian's going to tell you a little bit more about some of the nitty-gritty pieces that we do. But in particular, what I want to make you aware of is that there are budgetary considerations. So for example, in April, we were very fortunate that we had some money to spend that we weren't spending on food. There's actually a pro to online conferences. You don't have to feed everyone. And thankfully, we had put aside money to buy food because it turned out we needed a live closed captionist, which was actually wonderful to have. Zoom does have closed captioning. We'll talk a little bit more about that, about some of the challenges there. Live closed captioning in our experience was an improvement. We'll talk about why it's important to tell participants in advance what to expect so that they can plan for access to technology and internet access, that they can plan for their physical needs, like we're going to be sitting a lot, for example, and also plan for their psychological needs. Many people are comfortable on video, especially these days, but some people still aren't. And so just they can be ready for making those decisions. And as I mentioned before, we have uploaded a PDF of this PowerPoint, and on the left-hand side, you'll see that there are 2 links: considerations on accessibility and inclusion from the U of T AODA office, and a version of a document that we send out called What to Expect, which Adrian will talk a little bit more about as well. And these things are true both in person and online. It really is important to plan ahead for the accommodation needs of your participants. We strongly encourage you to ask a lot of questions from your IT people. Our IT people assured us over and over again that we were going to be able to host 500 people, but our Zoom accounts continued to show us 300. It took a few asks before we finally understood each other. We had a capacity of 300 in Zoom meetings and a capacity of 500 in Zoom webinars, which have slightly different functionality. And this affected our learning activities. For example, Zoom Meetings has access to a tool called breakout rooms for small group interactions. It is fantastic. And Adrian's going to tell you a little bit about some new functionality that the breakout rooms have that we didn't have at that time. So as enrollment climbed past 250, with a cap of 300 on Zoom Meetings where we could use breakout rooms, we realized that we were going to have to give up the breakout rooms in order to accommodate greater than 500 registrants. In the end, we actually maxed our 500 registrations. So we're very glad that we had the opportunity to use Zoom webinars. And there were some advantages to using webinar. Again, 6 weeks into the pandemic, we still weren't super comfortable or familiar with a lot of this technology. And we weren't quite sure what student behavior was going to be like. I mean, we should have known better. Our students are fabulous. And so there were no issues. But one advantage to webinar is that it gives you a lot of control over what participants can share in the chat, over what they can share on the video. It gives you just a tremendous, much higher degree of control. And so it actually kind of set our minds at ease a little bit. Although again, now we know after several months of operating this way, we didn't need to worry. So lesson being, communicate with your IT department. They know their tools well.
Okay, so I'm going to get into some of the nitty gritty of things that we had to consider with 5.5 weeks, I think it was, until our conference. And we made the decision to flip over to virtual without any real experience in it. One of the first things we had to do is decide whether we wanted to use a virtual events platform, like a full service one-stop shop. There's lots of external companies that are doing that, especially now, or do it all in-house using a video conferencing platform like Zoom or Teams, but us kind of handling all the details from registration to everything else. So our events coordinator, Florence, did a lot of research on that. We looked into things like Zoom and GoToMeeting and everything else. There's some examples on the screen. And some of the considerations we took into account were things like the number of participants we were expecting, like Jen mentioned, how many speakers we're having in, if we're going to be doing a single track or parallel tracks for the conference, existing infrastructure on campus and IT support, institutional requirements and approvals needed, and also the time it would take to get those approvals. And of course, we did this back in, February, March, April-ish, back at the beginning of the pandemic when things were just moving along. And of course, last but not least, among the things I'm mentioning, cost, because that's a budget implication, which again was unforeseen. So we looked at all of those. We talked to people at other campuses. We talked to people at other institutions. At the end of the day, after all that analysis, we decided to go with Zoom for a few different reasons. One, we could get IT support for it. Our IT department was on board. They could support us with it, even though we didn't have our institutional accounts all set up like we do now. They were there for us. We didn't need to get any extra, long approvals. The platform could accommodate our learning needs. So everything we were trying to do, both for the presentations, but also for more like the breakout rooms and everything. We had a very tight timeline. We didn't have a lot of time to pull a whole virtual conference together, but we were starting to get familiar with Zoom pretty quickly. It seemed easy enough to use without a long wait. Also, the experience for students and presenters and other people were starting to use Zoom at that point too. So it was a bit of a known quantity. So there's a number of different reasons, but we decided to go with Zoom. Next slide, please, Jen. And then after all that research, there was the whole planning process. And this was a little difficult to do, again, with 5 or 6 weeks to pull it all together once we decided on Zoom. There's a lot more to be done. And there were many chats done between our events coordinator and myself, I know, let alone other members on the team and at team meetings and staff meetings. But one of the biggest things that was helpful at the beginning is she compiled, after a lot of our chats, a big list of questions that we needed answers to. And these are things where it's great to have somebody on your team who's looking at all the detail, who understands the technology, but also understands the content of what you're trying to do. So some of those questions we looked at when we're researching are we going to do it live? Are we going to pre-record sessions, or are we going to do a hybrid of both? Are we going to offer concurrent sessions? Again, that would impact staffing and technology if we're trying to do concurrent sessions. Would we need more licenses? How would we register students? What were our kind of goals and capacity for that? And as Jen mentioned, that impacts what technology we use and if we have to upgrade or not. So there's a lot of things we had to kind of research in there in the planning. And then the actual planning, things we worked through in meetings and lots of impromptu chats on Teams were things like, are we going to give breaks? And how many breaks and how long should they be? How long would the sessions be? And are we going to start them at our normal conference time? We typically start more like a regular workday at 8:30 or 9 in the morning, but with everything going on with COVID and virtual learning, we talked about maybe starting later, which we did. So there's a lot of that discussion happening. Also things like accessibility, which I'll talk about a little bit more. How are we going to ensure accessibility? Given everything going on, are we going to be able to source reps for, we typically do keynotes, we do guest speakers. We have an employer panel. We do a mock interview with an employer. Previously, we've done a mini job fair. So what parts of that are we going to be able to source for a virtual session within 5 weeks? So there's a lot to talk about. And again, that list that we had developed was really great. We worked through that over many, many weeks. And then there is the preparation. What actually needs to get done? What's going on the website? What information do we need to register from students? How are we going to promote this, especially now that we're not back on campus anymore? We're all working from home. How are we going to get word out? Things like transition slides, are we going to use them? What's going to go on them? Who's going to do them for housekeeping and that kind of stuff? And then again, external speakers. There's so many things to talk about, the format of their talk, understanding our technology, if we're going to record, do we need media permissions, timing, also what to expect. We set up the conference as a kind of a full, we did it over 3 days and we set it up as a full day. So students start and they're kind of there most of the day as opposed to jumping in and out. So when our external guests came in, they might be jumping in the middle of a workshop. So making sure they're ready about what to expect and how do they communicate with us, and you know, they can send us a private chat or that kind of thing too. So there's a lot of things to talk about to prepare. One of the key points to get across here in the preparation is testing, and more testing. Both Florence, our events coordinator, and myself, we did lots of informal testing, trying out different features. But then we also brought it for full dry runs at our team meeting and tried to work through it all. Again, for our external speakers, we also did dry runs. We set up times. Sometimes it only took 10 minutes, sometimes it took half an hour, but we set up times with them all in advance to kind of have them come in, work through it all, know what to expect, figure out who's going to share their screen, if it's us, is it them, if they want to show a video during the session on YouTube as part of their presentation, you know, to make sure we know to check off that box, or they know how to check off that box to allow computer audio so that people can hear it. There's a lot of those kind of things to work through, and we did all of that ahead of time. Because we had 11 or 12, I think, external speakers, that took a significant amount of time that we had to plan for, but it all was definitely worth it in the end. So if there's one message from this slide here, it's like testing ahead of time. I won't get too much into the delivery point. There's a lot of detail on there, which I'm happy to kind of talk about if anyone wants to contact us afterwards. But there's publishing the agenda and adjusting the Zoom settings, uploading documents to shared drives, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more detail to get into if you're interested. Great. Staff, logistics, scheduling, people planning. A key point is really making sure that you've assigned roles really clearly in advance so everybody knows what they're doing. So out of the 6 or 7 people in our team, one of the greatest things we did was, again, we had a daily rundown that our events coordinator put together, which we can show you in a moment. Who's going to introduce the conference? Who's going to close? Who's going to introduce keynotes? Who's going to watch for our external speakers joining so we can admit them and greet them? Who's going to watch the chat box, and is there technical support? What happens if a guest speaker is late? What happens if a student is trying to get in the session and they can't get in? Who do they contact? So there's so many things to go through and document. It's very easy with all the moving parts on the fly to miss things. And I know when we were doing a lot of the testing and things, like for example, recording, forget to hit the record button. So who's responsible for that? And documenting all of that on our, what we call our daily rundown, was really helpful. Jen, I don't know if you can click on the daily rundown document. We can quickly show you what that looked like. And that was a key document that all of our staff found really helpful. And I think we'll continue to use that in the future. So there's a daily rundown there. That document, again, we're posting in our, for the conference. So if you want to look at that file for an example, you can take a closer look at it. But it breaks down, again, step by step, who's supposed to be where. There's links for the session, so people know where to go. Really valuable. So take a look at that when you have a chance. And it's really difficult for whoever's presenting to manage everything going on at the same time. So it's ideal to have it all laid out in advance and have your experts in the back end and the front end doing the content. Things to look at again are who's setting up breakout rooms, make it look seamless, who's setting up polls, who's launching the polls. Are you going to use the Q&A feature or the chat box? You want input via Mentimeter? There's a lot of different tools. So there's a lot of different things to look at of who's actually going to launch all of that. Switching over to accessibility, again, lots of discussion needed. We encourage you to talk to your experts on campus, your accessibility office. We definitely did for some best practices and advice. Again, you asked a lot of questions. Are we going to provide live closed captioning? And is that going to be using the built-in feature, for example, in Zoom or whatever other tool you're using? Or are we going to hire somebody, which is what we ended up doing? Are we going to caption videos after the conference? And how does that work? Are we going to record the sessions and make them available? Who's going to do that? Are there any privacy issues? Do we need media releases from people? And if so, who's going to collect those? One of the things we did for best practices is we made all of our content available in advance of the conference. So we made our PowerPoint documents, presentations, we made all of our documents like the agenda, our what to expect document, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Everything was uploaded and made available to students ahead of time so they could kind of see what was going to happen, how is it going to look? And I'll talk about that more in just a minute. Next slide. Communication, the key that can make or break your conference and your event. Again, so many questions to think about how we were going to communicate with students and what goes where, what's going on the website, how much detail, what's going on the agenda, what are we going to cover live during the presentation, if we were going to email students out information, what's going on there and when and how often. So one of the things we decided to do is after students registered 2 weeks before the conference, we sent them out an email to help build excitement and momentum, to help with our show rate also, but also let them know what to expect. And then in that email, we told them we're going to email you again 1 week from now, a week before the conference. In that email, we sent them again what to expect. We also provided them with a detailed agenda and a what to expect document. Basically what the conference is going to look like, where you're going to find documents that you need to look at ahead of time. If there are PowerPoints available, where are they? Questions like, oh, students want to know, what if I need a break? What if I have a conflict? Do I have to be there the whole day? Do I have to have my camera on or off? All that kind of stuff we sent out 1 week ahead of time. And Jen, I don't know if you can click on the what to expect document now. And there again, just a shot of that. You feel free, we provided that document again too, so you can scroll through and take a look at what we did there. It covers everything, like I mentioned, including we had some pre-work students could do with a self-assessment, where to find that, and it hopefully answered most of their questions that they had that, they might be apprehensive about how the whole thing's gonna work. So take a look at that when you have a chance. Then in that email we sent out 1 week ahead of time, we then told them, you know what, a day before the conference, within 24 hours, we're going to email you again. We're going to send all this information again, but we're also going to give you all the links, everything you need to get in the conference. And partly we held off until 1 day before because of fears of things like Zoom bombing. We didn't want it to be, the links to be out there for the world. That way we could also re-communicate all the information if they missed the email. So all the way, my point is across the way, we let them know 2 weeks ahead, we're going to email them again, make it really clear what to expect. The last thing I want to mention on this page is at the beginning of the session today, Jen mentioned that we use Zoom for everything except for one thing. And that one thing was our back channel. We set up a back channel using Microsoft Teams, which we use in our office every day. And that back channel was only available to us, our staff presenting, and it was really valuable. That way, during the presentations and during the conference, anything we needed to chat internally about, to coordinate, we could chat with each other without any risk of the conference participants and students seeing it by mistake. So things like coordinating transitions from one session to another, or are we ready to go? Can we start recording? Or somebody hasn't shown up yet. Can you talk for another minute? Or things that happen, which I think Jen will mention later. What happens if somebody loses internet, or somebody doesn't show up, or one of our guests drops out? What do we do? And that was all coordinated using Microsoft Teams as a back channel. And so that was really valuable and really well used. So I recommend that as a best practice moving forward too. And then event day, this slide I won't get into too much detail, it's very technical, but there are a lot of different ways you can assign people in Zoom, which we're using extensively. In brief, a couple of the key things to think about is the host has special powers, things like ending the meeting or launching polls, that kind of stuff that the host can do, but not everybody else can do. Not even all the co-hosts can do everything the host does. So keep that in mind, and also consider designating an alternative host who, that way if something happens and your host loses internet or anything else like that, you have somebody who can do these things, and you can set that up ahead of time using Zoom settings. We also assigned all of our own internal staff who are part of the conference, even if they weren't presenting, as co-host. Somebody with the eyes and ears watching out to make sure that everybody's still muted and there's no Zoom bombers coming in, there's no problems. We also had somebody designated as co-host who can watch chat box, answer questions. Somebody was set up as co-host to kind of monitor the Q&A feature with whoever's presenting, because if you've ever used Zoom and you're presenting, sometimes depending how you set up your screen, it's hard to see everything going on. So use that co-host feature. We also, when our guests arrived, we could make them either panelist or co-host depending on the need. There's some fine detail on that. Again, if you want to contact us after, we're happy to chat about that. We also had an MC, and that turned out to be Jen, who would kind of make sure that the flow of the conference went from morning when we started right through the end of the day, to give that kind of conference feel. And also somebody who could jump in, again, if something happens and there's any awkward moments, the MC could kind of jump in and cover that airtime, or at the end of a session say, okay, that's the end of this, here's what's happening next. So we assigned an MC who had that role in particular. We also had a behind the scenes technical team helping with any kind of technical problems that arise, and they always do. We also had support for, I mentioned earlier, what happens if, for example, there are students who, and again, this happened in April, so this happened quite early in it, but even now, there's always problems with, hey, I can't get into the session, how do I do this? So we had a process in place, and one of my roles during the conference was, in addition to watching everything on this screen with the conference, I had my other screen going with my email open, and we'd let our front desk know. We'd also let all the students know in the emails, if you have any trouble at all getting in, email me directly. And so there were a number of students who emailed with troubles getting in, and I was able to resolve those seamlessly and flawlessly without any kind of interruption and people being upset that they couldn't join our conference. So there's a lot going on. Take advantage, use your whole team. You need more people when you're doing like a big event like a conference than you think you would, to make it look like it's a seamless conference, in front of the camera, behind the scenes. Hopefully this gave you a good kind of overview of things to look at when considering those.
Thanks, Adrian. We were much like ducks, very calm on the surface and paddling like heck behind the scenes or under the water where no one could see. And it was seamless. We've all probably attended meetings where there's an interruption because someone's struggling to get in, or there's a trouble in the chat, and so a presenter's attention gets drawn away because they're trying to BMC and also manage a chat, and we just didn't want any of that stuff to happen. And we were able successfully, by piling lots of people and being very specific about a smaller number of tasks for each person, to be able to do that. We're aware that we had a great privilege that we were able to task all 7 staff members plus our event person on this one thing. Nothing else happened for 3 days, but it was such a high visibility event, and the turnaround had been so quickly. We felt good about having everybody do that, and it is actually our annual habit anyway. That is everybody's focus for those 3 days. So in the end, we successfully moved our conference online in just under 6 weeks. We engaged students from across all 3 campuses, which was very cool because we were the first one to get out of the gate. And in addition, because we were offering this online, we were actually able to engage students around the world. So some students were actually logging in from vastly different time zones, which was actually really cool to see because it's something Zoom could show us. In the end, as I said, we maxed out capacity. I think Adrian, we got nervous and shut off registration around 550 because 500 was the maximum, and we weren't really sure how many people were going to show up. And in the end, over the course of 3 days, we had 412 unique users. Now, I think our top day of overall attendance was about 340. So we actually could have probably enrolled a few more, but in the end, I feel good about the decision we made to make sure that we weren't going to overtax the system, and someone might have got left out. And our sessions included a wide range of kinds of sessions. So there were workshops, there were concurrent sessions where students had a choice. You could go to this room or this room, just like a real conference. We had guest speakers from industry and a panel of industry professionals and recruiters who provided students with tips and strategies. It really was our complete conference offered in an online format, and we were very, very pleased with how everything came together. So what were our key people power lessons? Well, when you have some redundancy, you have the capacity to handle a surprise or an emergency with no interruption in the flow of activities as far as participants can tell. And so now I'll tell the story that Adrian was hinting at about the most exciting thing that happened during Get Hired, which was when one of our guest speakers lost the internet at his home. Now, we didn't know what happened. All we could see on our screens was that he froze. And of course, freezing is not uncommon. So as the MC, I kind of, in the face of the conference, I kind of mentally, was smiling and nodding and counting how many seconds have passed. And at some point realized he was gone. Now, thankfully, I knew my guest speaker very well, and it's a small team within my team that chooses the speakers. And so I knew a little bit of something about his resources. So without saying anything, I knew things were happening on this Microsoft Teams back channel that Adrian mentioned. I could tell I could see little things lighting up on my screens as people were starting to say, oh, what's going on? I started to fill the time. And I said, well, it seems like something has happened to our guest, but what I'll do is I'll take you over to his website and fill you in with what I think he was about to talk about. And proceeded to share some of the materials that I suspected he was going to talk about. And then thankfully, Adrian and the team in the background reconnected with him. He very kindly burned a whole bunch of cell phone data to rejoin us through his cell phone because his home internet was down. And he finished his talk that way. But it was quite the interesting experience. We were very grateful for our back channel. We were very grateful that we had a designated MC who didn't have to try to figure out anything else about what was going on. Because as far as, students could tell that obviously he wasn't supposed to have frozen. But in terms of being able to get something out of the session, the time not being lost, and us looking extremely professional when he reappeared magically, and we were all right on topic even when he came back. It was very exciting, and it was a pretty magical moment, even though I was terrified for 20 minutes while I filled the time. So ensure also that everyone has some fluency and comfort with the tools. So again, we knew freezing wasn't unusual, but I knew that a really long freeze meant something had happened on his end, right? So because we had, as Adrian said, testing, we had tested this, played with this, deliberately tried to crash it, okay, what can we do to try, we really wanted to know what the limits were. So that we would know what to expect. So everybody actually, by the time everybody was on board, by the time we ran the conference, we were all very, very comfortable with the platform. We knew what it could and couldn't do. And it also helps that I think moving home very suddenly, moving to work from home very suddenly with the pandemic, we were already a very trusting team, but I think this very intense experience of shifting everything, our second biggest event of the year that we run in our department, third biggest event that we run in the year, we already had a lot of trust, but I think it created additional trust, adding this, sheen of technology between each other. When we tested it, played with it, knew who was good at what, who we could go to for which things, and then delineating the clear roles really made a big difference for us too. In terms of some of the other learnings, so in terms of staff roles, again, we thought we needed more people power than we thought we did, and so we were glad that we have it. And we've learned that putting emphasis into specific direction is really helpful. So, for example, if asking a panel for feedback, it's very helpful to name someone. Jen, what do you think? Oh, that's really interesting. Adrian, you were talking about that. And really leading a conversation through was very valuable, because the body language is missing, right, a lot of the time in these environments. We noticed that it was very important for us to check our home internet. And in fact, during our dress rehearsal, yes, we did a dress rehearsal, we actually had our IT department involved, and we actually had them check our home internet connections, which of course can be variable, but day before is sort of the best we could do. And we actually had them check our speed to let us know if there was someone who was at risk of maybe dropping off. And to me, that was reassuring when we all checked out that we were all going to be okay. Again, we had to cap registration at some point. Our average attendance rate at an event is 56%. And as I said, we capped out at 550. Overall, we had 412 unique attendees, which actually is better than 56% show up across the 3 days. So that was really good. We had contingency plans, as we said. We were worried about Zoom bombing because we'd heard about it happening. Our students are fabulous, and we probably shouldn't have been worried about it. But we were ready for it, just in case. We were ready for how to handle inappropriate conduct. We actually talked through and pretended when we were doing the testing. All right, Adrian, say something obnoxious and I'm going to turf you. We actually prepared ourselves to have to do that. Then we didn't have to do it once. But still, we were ready. Again, how do we fill dead air? We were ready for that. We communicated a lot before, during, and after. Our students weren't logging in until 10:30 or 11 in the morning, but our day started at 8:30 or 8 every day. I think maybe even earlier for you and Florence, Adrian, just to make sure that everything was laid out for maximum possible success on each day. And we also sent a lot of email reminders. So again, talking about using systems that you're already familiar with. At the end of every day, staff hung around online and we compiled an email of reminders. In fact, I started drafting those emails throughout the day, because as the MC, I had the pleasure of watching the workshops. I didn't have to deliver workshops. So while workshops were happening, I was taking notes and starting to draft these emails that we knew we wanted to go out with our survey. But we also wanted to ensure that we were sharing information that we promised to students at the end of every day. And I think students got used to that. And I actually had a number of students write back to say how much they appreciated actually that we were in touch every day. And one thing that we learned is also there were way more questions than we thought we were going to have. So because we were using Zoom Webinar, we had the option of the Q&A box, which is not a feature in meetings. And we took advantage of the Q&A box, particularly when we had a guest speaker, because we felt like that was way more useful than the chat box. The Q&A box actually helps you to organize sort of what's going on, which is really nice. And one of the reasons we ran out of time was that with Q&A, we would give the option for students to unmute themselves, but of course that takes time because you have to deliberately unmute said student and then they have to ask their question. So that was an interesting challenge. So definitely budget more time. I would say, Adrian, I don't know if you agree, everything just seems to take a little bit more time when we're doing it online. And that's not a problem. It's just something to be managing, right? That less talking, more time for other things. So at this point, I'd like to turn our attention to the next big program. So on the heels of Get Hired, which had a really positive vibe, we decided to support students. Of course, in May 2020, end of April, beginning of May, the economy was taking a nasty turn, and students were losing their summer jobs. And so there were still jobs out there to be had, but they were trickier to find. And so we wanted to support those students who were still out there looking for that summer opportunity that might still be out there. And so what we did was, so Get Hired had been a medium-sized event for us, and students really hadn't had much opportunity to interact. So we decided to create a collection of small group activities, kind of mini conferences, I guess you could say, for closed groups of about 20 students, 15, 20 students, or who would meet once a week over a 6-week period, but with the opportunity to connect with each other in between, of course. And we offered workshops. There was some pre-work, there was homework. And again, these were closed groups because we were striving to build community. So the big difference between Get Hired and the online job seekers club was that we were really attempting to build mutual communities of support. We could see that it was going to be a tough summer for a lot of students, and if someone could make a friend, we thought, you know, that would be a nice outcome of these activities. Because job search, we've all done it. Job search is isolating and lonely before you add the layer of technology and the challenges associated with the current environment and COVID keeping us apart. So we decided that would be useful, and students really, really enjoyed it. So we did medium size with Get Hired. We did small group recurring activities, and we've done a bunch of other things since as well.
So I'll talk about two of the other things we did. One was a huge 3-day event, our annual graduate and professional schools showcase. We went virtual with that, and also talk about a very small event very briefly, which was our Indigenous networking night that we held with employers and professionals. So the first one, the graduate and professional school showcase, just on the screen, there's a sample of just part of the handout we gave to students online about who's coming and Zoom links. But this was a huge undertaking. It took planning. We did it tri-campus wide across all 3 campuses of U of T. So there was a lot of meetings. We'd never done anything jointly like this before, especially virtually. So there's a lot of things we had to figure out. Over 3 days, we budgeted for up to 30 different panel sessions with our grad school partners, each with multiple schools, and 30 individual information sessions, all over 3 days, full day sessions. We had a lobby for students looking for help or to speak with for a very short period with one of our career staff. We had lunch and learn workshops. So it was a huge event. In addition to all the planning, I mean, it went off very well as far as execution goes, and especially with a new format. And we did it all using Zoom. Again, there was a lot of discussion throughout the spring and summer of different universities, including ours, about what platform are we going to use for our annual fair. And we looked into a bunch of them. But at the end of the day, our staff were very comfortable with Zoom presenting, and the technical and event staff on the back end, familiar with the different tools. Most of the reps coming in from the different grad schools were more than likely quite familiar with Zoom, again, having used it rather than having to learn another platform. In addition to that kind of knowledge of technology and best practices, again, no institutional approvals required at that point. We had our own kind of Zoom accounts we could use. There's no additional cost upfront to that point to figure out. So for that reason, we went with Zoom for it. And again, there's a lot of planning, everything we talked about doing daily rundowns of who's doing what and all that kind of stuff. We still did that. So we learned everything and implemented everything we learned, I should say, from Get Hired into the showcase. And over 3 days, we did this really big event using Zoom rather than going externally. There were lots of different platforms out there that we could have used, but again, they all would have taken time to go through the approval process, or they all had big cost or learning curves. And we wanted to spend the time actually working on the event itself, not being distracted. So this worked out the best for us to continue with Zoom. On the kind of opposite side, next slide, we've also continued to use Zoom for our networking events. So this is an example of one of the events that we held just in November. We've held a number of networking events, including our Indigenous student networking night. These were much smaller events. This particular one had 6 professionals. 3 were employer recruiter partners, and 3 were professionals who were just interested in giving back and sharing their advice. We had 8 students turn out for this event, so it's a grand total of 14 people. We've looked into different platforms again, and we looked into things like Hopin and Remo and other ones. Lots of them have, you know, pros and cons about them, but at the end of the day, Zoom met our needs. Again, we didn't go through the whole approval process and the cost and making sure that everybody knows how the tool works, from students joining in to reps to us in the back end. So we've continued using Zoom for all these events, from very large to medium, all the way down to this small event. We're open to new platforms. We're always looking and hearing what other people are using. We're exploring things for things we might use in the summertime too. But at the meantime, Zoom has kind of met our needs. And the advantage, like I said, for that is we have that comfort. I can spend my time working on sourcing people to come out and liaising with students, liaising with student groups. Our events coordinator doesn't have to spend as much time doing this and that. Same with our career staff, our counselors and strategists. So it's kind of where we've gone at this point, and it's worked really well, and we haven't had to put out any extra money for it as a great bonus.
Thanks, Adrian. And this is a photo taken by our events coordinator of our opening keynote speaker, Jamal. He was fantastic, very animated. You could feel his energy even through the camera. So we got super lucky that our original keynote speaker was totally comfortable moving online. And one of the things that Adrian has in fact mentioned, and I think I hinted at it as well, it was really helpful to have 2 computers going. One where you were presenting, so you were feeding information and data and PowerPoints into the conference, and one where you could watch the student experience. Watching the student experience was very, very helpful because we could see if something wasn't going well immediately. And so each of us had 2, I believe someone may even have had 3 screens happening just to make sure that we knew exactly what was going on at all times. So at the end of this presentation, in the PDF version, you will find some additional slides talking about some of the Zoom settings that we found particularly useful back then. There are new features in Zoom today. So for example, Zoom now has breakout rooms that have choose your own adventure options, which is fantastic, which is not something that we had in April. And Zoom has been improving their security and other things. So in some ways, this feels like a little bit of a love letter to Zoom, but we just wanted to highlight that you can do amazing, amazing online programming with tools that you already know and probably already have. So thank you so much for your time and attention today. So glad you joined us at Cannexus. Please do feel free to reach out if you'd like to follow up with myself or Adrian on any of the concepts or ideas that you saw. Please download the PowerPoint PDF so that you have access to those resources, which are the actual resources that we use. You are welcome to copy. We put them out there on purpose because we felt like it worked really well for us. So thanks so much. Have a wonderful Cannexus.